Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regularly scheduled council meeting. Today is Monday, April the 8th, and as we gather, we just call this meeting to order. We'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and the Straits Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen people known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and they're just honoring their connections, their ongoing connections to these lands and adjoining waters that continue to this day. Up first, we have approval of the agenda. I'm just going to make a suggestion that we move 10.1, which is not a public input and a relatively straightforward item, I believe, which is to do with the options analysis for Marina, and move it up following public input, and then that would allow one of our staff members to head home after that. So that's be my suggestion, but so move the agenda as amended. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the agenda? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We have two minutes for adoption, both of March 25th. Moved and seconded. Are there any changes, corrections, or amendments on those minutes? Not seeing any. Then all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We have just one rise in report, so we can just move the rise in report as listed here. Moved and seconded. And congratulations to Ms. Boyd, who is joining us as our Deputy Director of Corporate Services. Yes, I guess we have, is there a resolution attached to this actually when I say this, just to the rise in report, call the question on the rise in report? That's it. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The rise in report is effectively done when we publish it publicly, of course, but there we go. And for those who have been following council for a number of years, you might notice that's a new in the last few years process where we make sure that we always have a follow-up to our in-camera meetings, so as things come forward, they're always brought forward into the public realm so people are aware of any resolutions that happen inside of the in-camera portions. Up next, we have my remarks. I actually have a few remarks tonight. We have business to get to this evening, and I look forward to doing that. I just want to express my appreciation to our staff, in particular our Manager of Arts and Culture Coordinating, Andrea, what's Andrea's last name? Uh-oh. Pass, thank you. Ms. Pass, who does our coordinating for the artist studio tour that happened this last weekend. For any of you who had the pleasure of doing that, there's a large number of professional artists that open up their homes or their home studios to the public, and you can go through and see the public artworks in place. Very well attended this year. I was able to attend a number of them, and it sounded like both the attendance and the sales were fairly brisk this year, which is great news. So just thanks to the artists and to our staff for helping put that all together. And secondly, I just want to make sure people are aware that our Carnarvon Park reimagining is having its public engagement on April 17th, so coming up very quickly, 4 to 7 p.m. at Sportsview Lounge. Again, that's April 17th, 4 to 7 p.m. That concludes my remarks. Quick and easy tonight. The next section is our public comment and question period. We do have so our process, there's always some people who are new, either online or in person. If you're online and watching the live stream and you wish to call us on the 855 number, this is the time to do it, and just hit *9 to raise your hand. And anybody in the audience that wishes to address us, I'll call you forward. Just for clarity, the public comment and question period is for items not on the agenda. So each of the items on the agenda, we do invite members of the public to come speak to us at that time, but we don't do that for items that are, so this is really an opportunity. If there's points of interest that are of general interest to Oak Bay, you're more than welcome to come forward. We have up to 3 minutes per speaker, and we invite anybody who wishes to come forward and talk to council. Please come forward. What's that?
I didn't know if somebody else might have already.
Nope, nobody else has stuck up their hand. And you can, Mr. Groot, we know you, but the process here is that if you come forward, we just ask you to sit at the speaker's desk, which was Tommy Douglas's old constituency desk from Saskatchewan, interestingly. And just state your name, your municipality of residence, and then you have 3 minutes. So welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Peter de Groot. I live at 3561 Redwood Avenue. That's in the Henderson North Oak Bay area, and we have lived there since 1996. I hold a master's degree in community development and was one of the founding members of the Sound Transportation and Environmental Planning Society, STEPS for short, in Edmonton, which in the late 1970s helped persuade City Council of Edmonton to change its mind about constructing a freeway through the McKinnon Ravine, a 3-mile-long, beautiful ravine. And luckily, a number of interest groups were able to persuade council. It's still a beautiful park with a bikeway through it. And I only mention that because of the current, and I think it is still an issue in North Oak Bay, where I understand council has in recent days, weeks or months, decided that what then was the current situation of no parking from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. should be changed to a no parking at any given time. And I'm really here tonight to plead with you not to spend a penny on changing those signs. I seem to recall, I hope incorrectly, that it was going to cost $30,000 that I read in the paper to change those signs. Even if it was $3,000, there are 14 of those signs. I submit that it's really a waste of money, and that the change in the previous policy, which came about after quite a few council meetings, the compromise reads was that there would be no parking during the day, parking between 7 and evening, and in the morning was fine. I bicycle that route at least about 5 times a week, every morning, at other times of the day, and I can assure you that it is very rare that you will see a car parked on Henderson Road north of where Foul Bay ends. It is exceptional to see a car there. So in my considered opinion, there's absolutely no need to change that policy and spend any money on changing those signs. But I think it's much more important, and your staff have provided me with some statistical information about the number of incidents, not accidents, but incidents where people felt that there was a near miss. And the entire section between where Foul Bay and Henderson come together, there were, I think, 2 incidents reported, and the 3 where the school is, but no actual accidents. And I tell you, having biked this route so many times.
Mr. de Groot, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up. That's 3 minutes.
Is the 3 minutes up?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, so much for that. And
No,
if
that's
you
great.
have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Groot.
Thank you.
Any other topics of interest that people wish to speak to about? Again, this is items not on the agenda tonight, but of general interest to the community. Most people are here for items on the agenda. That is usually the case, but we do want to make sure this space is available to people. So not seeing any hands, I will come back to this table and move on to item number 7. And just procedurally, if people do raise issues such as the one Mr. de Groot raised, it's not something we would deal with in the meeting, but council has the option of either doing through a notice of motion process or other if there's a policy change that people wish to see. So I just always like pointing that out in case people are waiting to hear what the reaction is to a comment in this meeting. We don't typically resolve that in this meeting itself, but we really appreciate the things being brought forward. Just in case anybody doesn't want to sit through a 3-hour meeting until the end and find that out. So I ask that we just move item 10.1, which is the a project sign-off on undertaking options analysis for the marina. Ms. Bay is here to introduce this item. Ms. Bay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report seeks council sign-off on the approach to be used to deliver on Council Priority Project number 52, which is undertake an options analysis for the marina. So as we do for council priority projects, we bring what we call a council project sign-off to council for consideration, and it really allows council to weigh in on the approach that's being proposed to the project and to let us know whether that meets your expectations, and if not, to advise us accordingly to revise it. So what this project would do, the details of it are provided with your reports, is that it would provide technical and financial analyses of potential future land use options for the Turkey Head, also known as Spuhung Point, site currently occupied by the Oak Bay Marina and the associated parking lot. The completed analyses could help prepare for and support related First Nations and community engagement and support eventual negotiations with potential partners. So there is a related council priority project which talks about engaging with First Nations as well as with the community, and that is still a project on the books, and the thought is that that would happen in parallel with or subsequent to the findings of this report once council has that in process. And of course, discussions with First Nations are ongoing throughout this period. So should council sign off on the proposed project approach, then staff would proceed to secure a consultant. Once contracted, it would take approximately, we're thinking about 2 to 3 months to complete the work. And once it's complete, the analysis would be presented to council for direction on next steps. That, Your Worship, concludes my comments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bay. Are there questions to staff on this options analysis piece? Don't see any questions. So I'm happy to take a motion, either the recommendation or some other motion. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Move receipt of the staff report, Your Worship.
Certainly. Moved and seconded. We don't usually debate receipt. It's just for the procedural piece. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And Your Worship, I'd be pleased to move the staff recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Go ahead. No. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. If we do move this forward, is there an opportunity for conversation with First Nations around the content of this report?
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. We take council's direction on that. Some aspects of this might have confidential information that might impact future negotiations, and so it would really be up to council once receiving the report, how and when to disclose that information and share it with other interested parties. Discussions are ongoing with First Nations with respect to the marina site, and that's happening in parallel to this initiative.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the analysis done for the purposes of this report. I'm just, we find ourselves in a bit of a different position because the response to the initial request by council just didn't receive any response, or did not receive response in the way that we were hoping that it might. So I was just wondering whether Ms. Bay would comment sort of generally about sort of how the process has gone down, any feedback that we've gotten from the consulting community or through the process of soliciting and reaching out to try and get this information, talking to potential consultants to try and scope the work, whether or not she had any sort of broad observations about how the process has gone down and how this process is sort of going to give us beneficial information moving forward.
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. So council's earlier direction to staff was to proceed to try and engage the services of a project lead that would oversee really all aspects of the next steps marina lease negotiations topic, which would include this project, which was one council priority project, and also the other aspects of the project, which included the engagement with First Nations and the community consultation. We went through 2 separate processes, one a request for quotes targeted to specific consultants with the appropriate expertise, and another a broader request for proposals process that was open to posted on BC Bid, open essentially to the world. Neither process solicited any interest from the consulting community. So in follow-up discussions with a consultant that I had approached, I asked the question of, well, what is it? What do you think the feedback is on the street as to why there's no interest in this? And the feedback that I received was that the scope of taking kind of the project lead approach was just too much for any one consultant company to express interest in, and that there were a lot of unknowns when all aspects of a potential project are undefined. And so the recommendation was that we proceed to narrow the scope to a particular focus and take at least some of those unknowns off the table. And as this particular council priority project was already on council's list of requested items for staff to proceed during this term of office, staff are now bringing it forward for your consideration with that more focused approach.
Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Ms. Bay. It's not clear to me whether the project scope is still within the framework or addressing specifically the 4 objectives of the district, or whether it's removed from those 4 earlier objectives. Could you clarify, please?
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. It would still be within the context of council's directed for priority areas. That does help somewhat limit the scope, and as council has provided that direction, it's important that that continue to be the focus of this until council or unless council provides other direction.
Thank you for that. I don't see other hands, so I appreciate staff bringing this forward as a piece. I certainly think this will be done sort of in parallel with other processes, so we look forward to seeing some other pieces come forward, but certainly a point of great interest and some urgency with the community to see a future for that site. So thank you for bringing this forward as a viable option and to give us some pretty important financial and business information to guide us. Councillor Watson?
Yes, just a question for staff, please. Ms. Bay, if you get a vote tonight and this moves forward, what will be the expected sort of turnaround before we find out whether anybody's interested in approaching something that's narrower in scope?
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Should council provide direction, I would start reaching out to interested parties to see if I can get some consultant support on this project. A big contingent, the risk that I've identified in this is that we're not able to secure that consultant support. So if, despite best efforts, I'm not able to secure consultant interest in that, then I'd be back to council for feedback on directions on next step. I would anticipate I'd know within the next month.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Speaking without my microphone, bad form. So we're moving from section 10 back into the regular order of the agenda to section 7. This whole section is available for public comment, so we'll invite people if they wish at each item. As I start each of these, if you are watching online, and if you're in the Zoom, you can just raise your hand at the start of each section, or if you're calling into the 855 number, same thing, call into 855 and hit *9. That is *9, not #9, to raise your hand within the app. Our regular order of process here, and it'll follow for all of these, just so people are familiar. We'll get a brief introduction from staff on the matter. We'll have questions from council and public input, and then discussion at the council table and a motion. I will say this first one is one that is coming out of a committee of the whole, so we often have these long debates at committee of the whole where we have public input, staff input, debate, as you can see, and this first recommendation is essentially to seek some additional public input. So I don't anticipate a lot more public input on this since it's not a decision point, but just so we understand the process that will happen on all of these agenda items. So with that, I will turn this over to, I'm not sure who I would actually just Mr. Bowl. We don't really sort of introduce recommendations that come out of the committee of the whole. So for the benefit of the public, this is a recommendation on blasting regulation, in which we are recommended to ourselves to the decision-making body here at council to continue the public input portion of that. So that's the recommendation here in front of us. Given that we've had that discussion, is there anybody from the public who wishes to talk to us about the blasting bylaw or the approach of continuing consultation? Don't see any hands popping up. Didn't expect a lot of hands on that one. I'll go over
I'll
back
move
to.
the staff recommendation.
So this is a recommendation of the committee of the whole, technically, on this one, which is to gather additional public information. Yeah, if you can read it, the revised version, since it's changed slightly in the wording from one version to the next.
I'll move that staff be directed to gather additional public input on the proposed blasting changes outlined in blasting regulation changes consultation summary and next steps dated March 18th, 2024 through Connect Oak Bay.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move on to item 7.2, which is a contract award recommendation for animal control services. Ms. Bay will do the introduction of this item. We'll then take questions from council, seek public input, come back to this table for direction and recommendations. Ms. Bay, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report seeks council authorization to sign a contract for animal control services. The current contract expires at the end of June of this year. Earlier this year, the district issued a request for proposals to secure services following expiry of the existing contract. Staff evaluated the two submissions received per the terms of the RFP. As a result of that review, VAX's proposal received the highest score. As a result, staff recommend that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute a 5-year contract for animal control services with Victoria Animal Control Services. The estimated cost for the 5-year period is $490,000, excluding GST. In addition to that recommendation, staff further recommend that directors, officers, and employees of Victoria Animal Control Services be appointed as animal control officers for the purpose of enforcing the district's animal control bylaw. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to questions from members of council. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Through you to Ms. Bay. So it sounds like there was a lot of due diligence done around the RFP, which is wonderful, so thank you for that. But I would like to ask a question in regards to the cancellation process. If, for example, if we went ahead with this contract, what would happen if they wanted to cancel the contract or if we wanted to part ways with the proponent?
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's two components, and one of them has two components associated with it. I'll take the district's options first with respect to if there's kind of a material default in the delivery of the core elements of the contract, then the district can give notice to the provider that they are to rectify those defaults, and if they're not within 14 days, then the district has grounds to terminate the contract. There is a more general provision in the contract for the district to provide 3 months, so 90 days, notice to the contractor to terminate the contract for any reason, whether substantiated or not. So that's a clause that I suspect probably most contractors would prefer were not in the contract, especially in the context of there not being a reciprocal opportunity for the provider. So it is a contract is written that's quite in favor of the district.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, a few questions to staff. Just trying to understand a little bit about the relationship between a contracted service like this and our own organization. And so, in particular, if you could just explain a little bit the reporting relationship when an animal control officer is sworn in as a bylaw officer, and they're with a contracted service, who do they actually report to, and how does that relationship work? If you could just comment on that first, please.
Go ahead, Ms. May.
There's two components to that. The staff within a contractor would report up through that contracted organization's, I guess, organizational chart. If there's an issue with the contractor's performance outside of any outside that context, then the complaint would come to the district. At present, I oversee the animal control services contract, so the complaint would come to me, and I would review that complaint if received. We typically ask for those complaints to be delivered in writing so that the contractor has the opportunity to, in turn, reply in writing to any complaints that are received specifically about behavior of the contractor. There is a flip side or another element to that, which is if the complaint is about a service level, in other words, dissatisfaction with policies, dissatisfaction with the bylaw provisions themselves, dissatisfaction with the amount of enforcement that is happening, those are really service level types of complaints, and those would come to staff, and then staff would monitor the trends of those, and if there's a marked trend or some decisions that have to be made with respect to changes on that, then staff would bring that to council for direction with respect to those kind of things that are within the district's purview. Really up to council to set the standards and the bylaws, and the contractor is not unlike if it was a staff member that was enforcing the contract. They're enforcing the regulations that council has deemed appropriate for the community.
Thank you. I think maybe just for clarity, one other part of that is that should council wish to adjust the service levels upwards, that would typically require a budget change, and that would typically have to come not just on a report, but probably back to a budgeting process for approval at the end of the day. Back to you, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Bay, for that. That's really clear to me. The other question I had really was about service levels, and based on the staff report, it looks like the RFP was responded to based on really continuation of the same, which is fine. But I appreciate that the services extend well beyond dogs, but I am aware that, you know, or had presumed there would be a lot more dogs in the community, and maybe therefore our service levels should go up, but maybe that's not the case. Could you just let me know, or let the public know, what the number of licensed, or I guess they're called licenses, right? You get a dog license. What's happened to dog license registration in Oak Bay, say, over the last 10 years?
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Say over the last 10 years, it's kind of vacillated between. Well, it's vacillated. Actually, if you give me a quick second, I'll just look it up. I have those numbers somewhere. Oh. Oops. My. Yeah, so, sorry, I just blanked on the numbers. It's roughly between 1,400 and 1,700 over the last 10 years. I would say probably averaged at about 1,600. It goes up and down a little bit. The average is about 1,600. I would say, yeah, I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
So really, in terms of, there's no like population change in dogs that would suggest that we need more service level in order to respond to the kinds of things that happen with dogs. That's really what I was trying to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Part of it is probably volume. Part of it is also just the type of dogs, the type of humans, the type of conflict situations that are out there, the types of spaces that we have available, what our regulations are. It's complicated. It's more than just the sheer volume of animals. We do have some flexibility provided in the contract that is before you for consideration, in that should there be a need to increase service levels, assuming that council is prepared to fund that increase in service levels, there is ability to adjust the service levels up and down by 15% within the context of this contract, and that could be done multiple times with the appropriate notice. There is also a provision within the budget estimate that I've provided you for an additional 40 hours of service per year for us to ask for targeted additional enforcement should that prove necessary. And so, for example, our Parks Department is very much at the front lines with respect to being aware of what the complaints are out in the community about issues, and will from time to time contact the animal control services and asked for additional patrols or enforcement in areas that are particularly problematic. So there's multiple levels of flexibility to ensure that the contractor is able to, within the context of this, to respond to needs as they change in the community.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions.
I have Councillor Patterson next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Ms. Bay. Thank you for the report. I'm just wondering if you could share with us some of the training or knowledge requirements for a person to become a licensed animal control officer?
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. Typically, contractors will require some level of training. There is a Justice Institute of BC training program, and many require kind of level 1 training program for their officers. Many of them come from a perspective of having enforcement experience with either the police or other types of organizations that are used to investigating and enforcing and working with the public in that kind of context. So it's varied. The backgrounds can typically be varied with animal control officers, but there is a minimum level of expectation of some training to suit them for the job.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to staff. And I appreciate the content of the report. I note in the report that there were 2 respondents, and the recommended respondent for contract is mentioned here. And I get the sense, I seem to be of the understanding that from all intents and purposes, most of animal control, at least in the CRD, is delivered by 2 agencies. I'm not aware of a breadth of agencies available to do the work. So that's just general question with respect to the RFP process, and that, in terms of, we're not necessarily capturing, there's not necessarily a lot of potential options in that regard. And I'm just wondering, and I didn't ask this question in advance of staff, and I apologize, but if staff knows off the top of their heads, if there are any CRD municipalities that are actually just doing this themselves, whether or not they're just doing it without a contracted service, whether or not there's any examples of internal delivery of that service. But they may not know that off the top of their head.
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not aware of any. I'd be really surprised if I know the big ones aren't, and that just from an economic standpoint, the economies of scale would be really challenging. You look about some of the services that need to be provided as part of an animal control function. It's not just the staff members, members. There's specialized vehicles, there's specialized equipment, there's a pound. To make that all work for, and just looking at, we're recommending here a $500,000 contract for 5 years. That would, or approximately, so that would be less than $100,000 a year to buy ourselves a staff function, as well as those other things for that amount of money. Would not be doable, and so the smaller municipalities would be even more stretched to make the economics of that work. And I know the bigger ones are going with either the BACs or the CRD.
Thank you very much. I don't see other questions. I just, from our clarification perspective, can you just briefly run down when evaluating we have the financial, obviously, and then the technical, sort of what the process was undertaken, looking at the 2 proposals in terms of the technical analysis, how that was done, as well as where references checked, those sorts of questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the request for proposals sets out the evaluation methodology. So the process that we follow is in line with the request for proposals process that's set out. One of those is a reference check, so that's a portion of it, whereby I phone the references of both providers. Some processes only phone references once you're kind of the final candidate, but we actually use the reference checking process as part of the scoring mechanism. Part of the checking of references is also assessing if we have a provider that's continuing to propose services going forward, is to assess the services that they have provided for the municipality over the past period of time that they may have been performing services for us. So that is assessed. We also look at the capacity of the proponent to provide services and the service model and any experience they have providing similar services as part of the evaluation criteria, as is the quality and the breadth of services proposed. And then I started with checking on the references and also assessing past performance, and we ask for quantitative measures this time around as well on the costs per action and things like that. So that was assessed as part of the evaluation. And only once we review those components, which are all part of the technical evaluation, only the ones that are deemed technically proficient move on to the stage of having their financial envelopes opened. So that is done as part of a separate process. We're not biased in how we review the technical components by what we see on the financial score, because all of that is done first. The financial scoring is done, strictly speaking, one in relation to the other, so just a measure of how close they are in their numbers will determine how close their scores are. In this case, the financial proposals were weighted at 30%, or the component that was related to financial was given 30 points, so 70 points were for the technical aspects. And then I'll just note that the proposals were reviewed by 3 separate parties, all staff in 3 separate departments with very different portfolios and backgrounds. So and that was done independently. And then we averaged the scores that were received from those 3 independent evaluations.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification. Don't see other questions, so I'm going to turn to the public. This probably needs a bit more preamble than most. This item does allow for public input. It's also clear that the social media has been sort of focused on this incident recently where there was a cat attacked and killed by a dog. Obviously, horrible, traumatic event, and has had significant ripples through our community. Unfortunately, I just want to point out, some of those social media discussions have led to some abuse of our current service provider, and it's pretty significant and inappropriate abuse. So I raise this because we can't control the social media world, but we can control in here, and I'm just going to ask everybody to be very respectful. We are obviously considering a contract award consideration tonight. We still want to abide by the respectful workplace requirements, and there was a number, I think there's about 9 or 10 pieces of correspondence that came in on this. Normally we publish that as part of the agenda, but part of our requirement is that two things: we can't address specific bylaw enforcement files in this room. In fact, by law, we're not allowed to, as an elected body, question or make direct reference to a single incident file. So because those came in and often reference that specific file, and there was some language in there on some of them that breached our respectful workplace pieces, we couldn't redact it in time. I just want those who did write letters that we have read it. All those pieces of correspondence have come to council. We just couldn't redact them and get them into the public folder in time. So that's there. So they've all been circulated, all been read. But just in the interest of keeping things very respectful here, just as I invite people forward, and the first speakers can come forward at this time. If anybody's online, same process, you raise your hand or hit *9 if you're calling into the 855 number. But just a couple of sort of ground rules here, if you don't mind. Just as a way of managing professional courtesy here and being compliant with WorkSafe's requirements for respectful workplace, we can't question the ethical or professional qualifications of either of the proponents that were brought forward. And I do want to point out the organizational qualifications was part, as Ms. Bay pointed out, part of our assessment process. And we can't speak to individual investigations tonight. We've had some in the public portion of other meetings, we've had that been allowed and that's been welcomed. But tonight, as we're dealing with the contracts, we can't speak to those pieces. So yeah, appropriate comments directly related to the award of a contract or not, but not to specific bylaw enforcement matters. With that, I just, again, will make the call. If anybody wishes to come forward and talk to council on item 7.2, please do so at this time. Pretty sure somebody probably wants to speak to us, maybe not. Okay. I'll check online as well. Again, if you wish to speak to the contract award recommendations, this is the chance for the public input. I'm just checking with staff. There's no other online people raising their hands that I see. Anybody in the audience who wishes to address council before we, so again, processes, we're going to come back to this table for deliberation, motions, discussion. Okay. So back to this table. We have
Move receipt.
So we have receipt of the report. All those, we don't usually debate receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed?
And I'll move the staff recommendation.
So their staff recommendation here is the authorized to execute a 5-year animal contract with Victoria Animal Control Services, and the second part, which is the assigning these or appointing them as animal control officers for the purposes of the contract. So it's a 2-part motion. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion. Does the mover wish to add anything?
No, I feel quite comfortable with the way staff has looked into the RFPs and rated the RFPs and looked at all of the recommendations coming forward in regards to the RFP. So I'm comfortable putting this motion on the floor.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you. I just express on behalf of council to staff the work undertaken on this one. This has had the unfortunate timing of this with a couple of really serious incidents. One that resulted in some dogs, the attacking dogs being euthanized, another one in not. These are always incredibly difficult and emotional situations in the community, and appreciate the work done by staff and our contracted services for the work undertaken. With other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move on to 7.3. One second. 8. Yeah, 8.1. I'm sure I didn't miss one. Thank you. We move to 8.1. These next 3 items, 8.1 to 8.3, are not subject to public input by our procedures bylaw. Our first item here is 3005 Lansdowne Road. We have Mr. Muller here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. The district has received an application for an upland siting design guideline review for the property located at 3005 Lansdowne Avenue. The applicant is proposing the removal of the existing multi-tiered back deck and replacing it with a single-tier deck, a pergola structure, and within the existing footings. And the application also includes replacing the back French doors with a glass sliding door. On March 12th, the application was sent before the advisory design panel for their review and recommendation. And their recommendation was to approve the application subject to the applicant considering a review and upgrade of the previous material choices. In response, the applicant made changes to the material choices, swapping the aluminum railings for wood and as per the original structure. Staff's review of the application and supporting materials finds this proposal to be in keeping with the upland siting design guidelines, as well as the necessary tree and zoning bylaws. The applicant and homeowner, Claudia Bloom, is in the audience, I believe, to answer any questions the council might have.
Thank you. I see them in the audience here. I don't know if we'll have any questions or not. This is not subject to public input. It is, however, subject to council questions if there's any of the applicant or of staff. I'm not seeing any, so perhaps we'll get to motions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson. Your hand is so high, too, I should be able to see that.
Sorry. Thank you. I do have a question. It may actually be more for the applicant than for staff, and I wonder if I could ask it to the applicant. Is that in order?
We'll just ask the question and I'll direct it.
Okay. All right. So the question is, in the recommendation that came from out of advisory design panel was to make changes with respect to materiality. And I know because I was at that meeting that it encompassed quite a few things. And the applicant has chosen to address some of them and not others. And I just wanted to ask a question about those decisions in terms of making those adjustments.
Welcome. I'm just going to ask to state your full name and municipality of residence for the record, so our staff can take it down, and then you can answer the question as you see fit.
Good evening. My name is Claudia Bloom, and I live in 3005 Lansdowne Road, which is Oak Bay, I guess.
And so the question was just, if you can, the question was just, there were some recommendations from the advisory design panel on some material changes, some of which were made, some of them weren't. If just perhaps provide a quick overview of the rationale for the changes and non-changes made following that process.
Yes. I think it's clear that we changed the railing from aluminum to wood. And what we didn't change, and I can't remember that there was a discussion. I think it was just a mention that we changed it from wood to, composite. And we didn't consider changing that because wood, we have had wood the last 14 years and it's not very resistant. You have to paint it every few years. And composite looks exactly the same as the wood. It looks really the same. And it's way more popular. And we talked to different builder. That's what people do these days. And it's exactly the same colors. That's why we want to go with the composite. And I'm not sure what else there was in terms of.
Ms. Watson, do you have something specific?
Yes, there was specific discussion at the committee meeting, and I don't know if it was really captured in materiality, but with respect to French doors versus glass sliding doors, and that was a discussion, and I just wondered if that if that was further considered.
The reason why we want to change it from the French door to the sliding door is that it gives us a more open feel, to use the outdoor space more easily, like that we have the flow, and even when it's closed, like when we don't use the deck, it's just bigger than it is at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay for a second in case there's any other questions. I don't see any other questions.
Move proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Bloom. I think we're done. All those in favor? Any opposed to receipt? None.
And I'll move that council approve Upland Siting and Design Application ADP 001702 to renovate the deck, construct a pergola, and install a glass sliding door for the property located at 3005 Lansdowne Road.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Fairly small, modest, but attractive additions to your house. So thank you very much and enjoy your renovations. Moving on to 8.2, we have Upland Siting and Design for 3220 Beach Drive. Mr. Muller.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received an application for the Upland Design Guideline Review for the property located at 3220 Beach Drive. The applicant is proposing to construct a second-story, 93 square meter, 1,000 square foot addition to the existing garage by raising the roof to create a livable floor area that will consist of bedroom, balconies in the front and rear of the building, and an extra attic storage space, as well as a passageway from the existing home to the upper level, on the upper level. The fenestration and material choices are intended to mimic the main house and in styling details. On March 12th, the proposal was brought before the advisory design panel, and they provided recommendation for the approval with consideration of the window trim on the addition, as the panel felt it did not resemble the main house effectively. The applicant felt the original design was what was best suited for their home and declined to make changes based off of the ADP's recommendations. Staff reviewed the applications and supporting materials and find the proposal to be in keeping with the Upland Siting Design Guidelines, as well as the zoning bylaw. And I believe Lewis Clark is in the audience if there's any questions of the applicant.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Muller. Are there any questions for the applicant on this? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, to Welcome to the applicant. And if you could just push the button in front of you, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the applicant. I just wondered, this looks like also it could potentially be a secondary suite in the future. I'm just wondering if, I know it's actually being used as an office and for own personal use, but it could be converted to a secondary suite in the future. And I just wondered if you had contemplated that at any point. Thank you.
No, at this point, good evening, Mayor and Council. At this point, we did not consider having a secondary suite above the garage. Everything's internal to the building. We didn't want to ruin the architecture within the building in order to create a new stairway. So we've used the existing stairway to access the upper floor and access the new space above the garage.
Thank you very much.
So could you just state your name for the
Oh,
record?
sorry. Louis Horvat, I'm with Zebra Design.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay,
Move for seat.
moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I move that council approve Upland Siting and Design application ADP 00169 for the construction of a second story to the garage for a property located at 3220 Beach Drive.
And seconded. Any further discussion on the application? Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment because I was there when the ADP reviewed this, and I just wanted to note that they did obviously always a thorough professional job looking at it, and just would comment that the applicant's decision not to follow through on the particular advice is really I think a fair design decision. There was some back and forward about that, about whether the window treatments or the treatment of the garage roof really did justice to the house, and I think there was definitely room for different views about that, so I have no difficulty approving this the way it has come back unaltered. I think it's a lovely addition, and just fine, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll just make a quick comment. Just I do appreciate. I think it is a very sympathetic design, really appropriate for the house design, and well done on that front. It looks like it fits in very nicely. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. If all such building things, these last two are this easy. So
Thank you very much.
and for everybody from 3005 Lansdowne and 3220 Beach Drive, you're not required to stick around anymore. That concludes the business. The approval is completed, and you can go. You're welcome to stick around if you wish. I don't want to kick you out, but I know we are our own entertainment in some ways, but you don't have to stay. We are moving on to 2199 Lansdowne Road. Mr. McStravick.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Council is being asked to consider an application for a development permit for the property located at 2199 Lansdowne Road. This item follows Council's approval on March 25th of an application for rezoning and development variance permit to facilitate a two-lot subdivision which will be built out including residential duplex with secondary suites. As the subject property is located in the infill residential development permit area, a development permit is required prior to approval of a subdivision or construction of new dwellings enabled by rezoning. The development permit before Council tonight relates to the form and character of the proposed development, rather than the land use and density, which were addressed through the recently concluded rezoning. As detailed in the staff report included in tonight's agenda, staff find that the form and character of the proposed buildings is largely in keeping with the intent of the infill residential development permit area guidelines, which seek a high-quality character for new development and which support the densification of established neighborhoods through sensitive infill. Accordingly, staff recommends that Council approve the requested development permit. The applicant, Joseph Klenda, is in the room tonight in case Council has any questions of him. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McTravick. Back to this table. Are there questions of the applicant or of staff? As Mr. McTravick noted, this is the conclusion of an earlier process that did include public input. We're back at this table for the conclusion of this, which is a zoning bylaw amendment piece. So Are there any questions? I don't see questions popping up. It is for public input. Is there anybody here who wishes, oh, wait a second. Not for public input. I moved my pieces of paper around. Not for public input. I'm not seeing questions. It's for the applicant or staff, so not for public input. So we'll look for motions at this point then, and we'll get to a debate. Councillor Watson?
I'd be
Receipt
pleased
first.
to move receipt first,
Sure. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
and then I would like to move the staff recommendation.
Can I, read it
Get
aloud,
it
please.
out. That council approved development permit, DP quadruple 043, for subdivision and construction of a new single-family home and a duplex with secondary suites in the infill residential development permit area on the property located at 2199 Lansdowne Road.
Be approved. Just want to make sure thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Moved and seconded. To debate? Councillor Braithwaite?
Thanks, Mayor. I will, as I did last time, vote against this, and for a number of reasons. It pains me to have to vote against it, but I do feel that it does not, for me personally, it's not complementary with the character and scale of the surrounding neighborhood and adjacent buildings, which is one of the guidelines. I don't feel that it is, that it meets that guideline, and I know that there's other people in the vicinity of that location that don't feel it meets the guideline either. So for me, this is the major reason I have to vote against it, is that it does not fit the surrounding buildings. And I also believe that there should be no variances on this. I think what would have been more fitting for this this location would have been one fourplex and not to have subdivide the property. So I will be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. We do appreciate when people are voting against things, just to say a couple of words to explain, although we have had a vote on a portion of this prior. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I also, I've really struggled with this one, but there are two issues for me. One was what I consider to be an adequate consultation with the local neighborhood, and they expressed that openly to us on a number of occasions, or at least 2 occasions. The other is the lack of below-market potential for a below-market rental, particularly for the secondary suites. There is a college within walking distance of this location. We've talked about the need for student housing previously, and there would be an opportunity here to provide below-market rental for students nearby. So again, I feel, as Councillor Braithwaite feels, it's difficult, and I don't like to vote against something that provides further density. But for those reasons, I must vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rain. Any other just comments before I call the question? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Green, Councillor Braithwaite opposed. That carries. That concludes the portion of work on the 2199 Lansdowne Road. Thank you, Mr. Petrovic. But you stay, because we're moving on to 9.1, which is a zoning amendment for 2095 Granite Street. Again, we're back into the public consultation phase, so 9.1, 9.2, and 9.3. Welcome public input. Same process as before. We'll have a staff introduction. We'll have questions from members of council. We'll have once that's concluded, we'll go to the public for any additional comments, and then we'll come back to this table for any direction. Good evening. Mr. Petrovic, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening. This next item relates to an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for the property located at 2095 Granite Street. The applicants wish to make a textual amendment to the zone to enable a subdivision to allow the existing congregate housing facility to be separated onto its own lot to continue its operation as previously. And tonight, council is being asked to give staff direction to draft the rezoning bylaw. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much, Mayor, and through you to staff. I see that there's no, the recommendation is not to have a CAC on this, but my question would be, if perchance something happened and Threshold Housing had to go out of business, goodness, that would not be great, but if they did, would there be any recourse, and they sold that property as now as a single family property, would there be any recourse to go back for a CAC in the future? Or is that once we say no CAC is required, then we don't have any recourse to go back to get a CAC?
I think this is in relation to the fact that we're dealing with a nonprofit society running it, but if it was turned around and stopped being a nonprofit society with the CAC, yeah. Is there, Mr. Mistravik?
Thank you, through your worship. The property will maintain its institutional zoning through this process, and it's a textual amendment to the zone, which would allow the congregate housing facility to exist on a lot separately from a church use, but the underlying institutional zoning will remain in place. So any subsequent designs on a multifamily housing or anything of that nature would require future rezoning, which would be assessed on its own merits. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Smart?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, to Mr. Stravik. Just to expand upon that, there was a comment in the report about when using this clause to not have the CAC, that there might be a housing agreement in place, and I was wondering, obviously this is a very different situation where the housing already exists, but was that something that staff considered, and how onerous is that, and is that something that would really provide us any more protection, or is it really not important considering the already established housing?
I'll just pass that question over to staff. Mr. Mistravik?
Thank you, through your worship. Council would have the authority to require that a housing agreement bylaw be put in place, but in the opinion of staff, it's not necessary in this case, again, because it's an existing use and facility and they're not proposing to add or take away any units. And again, as the underlying institutional zoning remains, the option available breadth of uses is quite limited.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Again, I'll make the invitation to members of the public online. If you wish, you can hit the *9, calling into the 855 number, or using the Zoom application. Just use the signal your intent to comment or ask questions. Before I go there, are there any other questions from members of council?
Move receipt.
Just before we get to motions, I'm just going to go to the ask for the public. Is there any members of the public who wish to come forward to address council? This is on 2095 Granite Street. Don't see any hands popping up or any rush to the microphone, so I will come back to this table. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite. You were starting to make a motion. I interrupted you.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move that council direct staff to draft a zoning bylaw amendment for application ZON 00047 at 2095 Granite Street, and to give notice in advance of the date on which council will consider first reading in accordance with section 467 of the Local Government Act.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, thank you for the report. I just wanted to say that I've spoken with members of that neighborhood, and they're very supportive of this proposal, and have always been supportive of Threshold House. And so I think that's a really positive thing. And so thanks to them, and thanks to our planning department for making this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion in front of us? I will just echo Councillor Green's comments. I think this what makes this fairly straightforward is that Threshold has been an exemplary member of our community for many years, provided unbelievably important services for the youth in our community and for the region, and have just been wonderful neighbors. And so I just express my appreciation for that, for the work that they do, and wish we both sort of wish we had more and wish we didn't need them as a service. So with that, I also appreciative of the United Church and their willingness to come to this agreement with Threshold. It's a very generous process that's been undertaken here, and I think serves the broader community well. So my appreciation to everybody involved. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. Good luck. I move on to item number, same rule applies. You're welcome to stay or not stay as you see fit. 9.2, which is a zoning amendment application for 2465 Florence Street. And I believe in this case we have Mr. Green, our Deputy Director of Community Building and Planning. Welcome, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. The purpose of this application is a zoning amendment application that is seeking to amend the floor area ratio requirement of the one-family residential RS5 zone in order to allow the property owner to facilitate the reconstruction of an existing accessory building, in this case a detached garage that is on the lot. The applicant is proposing to reconstruct the detached garage as it requires a significant repair. However, a zoning amendment is required in order to allow that reconstruction, given that the property is legal non-conforming with respect to density of development on the lot. The house age is from 1914, and as such, the house and the detached garage, and under our district's zoning bylaw, accessory buildings are counted in that floor area ratio, and so as such, that current house and accessory building exceed both the lot coverage and the floor area ratio requirements of the RS5 zone. The proposed garage will slightly decrease the footprint of the garage. It's a smaller construction, and it would bring the property into compliance with lot coverage requirements, but not floor area ratio. And as such, the applicant has to amend that zone to increase the FAR in order to the district to issue a building permit, which is how this came up in relation to this application. Staff believe the proposal is consistent with the OCP, and given that the sole purpose of the bylaw is to permit a development that is in whole or in part residential, staff are recommending that council not hold a public hearing on the proposal. However, staff are recommending that council direct staff to give notice of the application and the date at which council would consider first reading. The applicant is here to answer any questions that council may have on the application. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Green. Same process before. We'll have questions. There's many members of the public who wish to speak. If you're online, please indicate now. And then back to this table for direction. Are there any questions for staff or the applicant? I feel silly asking this question, but it'll take me longer to look it up than just to ask the question. The house without the garage is still not in compliance with the zoning bylaw. Is that correct? The house exceeds the 0.4?
Correct.
Okay. That makes it very simple. Any other discussion or questions for staff? Are there any members of the public who wish to address us with questions or comments? This is on 2465 Florence. 2465 Florence. I don't see anybody online. I don't see anybody in the audience sticking up to come talk to us, so I'll come back to this table.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed?
I will move that council direct staff to draft a zoning bylaw amendment for application Z0N0 or ZON 00048 at 2465 Florence Street, and to give notice in advance of the date on which council will consider first reading in accordance with section 467 of the Local Government Act.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll just make a comment. This is a kind of a strange one to have to go through a rezoning for a replacement garage. It doesn't happen very often, but it is a quirk. These old buildings are sometimes built outside of the current bylaws, well outside, and so we do have to kind of manage these and bring it all into compliance. So you'll have, at the end of this, a nice compliant lot, and it'll all be above board legal and clear, so that's always a good thing. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, and thanks to the applicant for going through the process, and best of luck with the project. We move to last item of this section, which is the 9.3, a development variance permit. This is for 2108 Central Avenue, and we have Mr. Muller back.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received a development variance permit application for the property located at 2108 Central Avenue. In September 2023, the homeowner of 2108 Central was served with a stop work order after the district was made aware of work without a permit being conducted on the property. The homeowner had completed construction of 11 square meter, 125 square foot sunken patio located on the exterior side yard, leading to the side door and side door of the home, along Falkland Road. Once reviewed, it had been discovered that the structure was, as defined by the zoning bylaw, did not meet the required 3.65 meter setback from the exterior side yard. As such, the homeowner was given the option to either dismantle the patio or retroactively seek a variance to relax the exterior side yard setback to 0.5 meters instead of the 3.65 meters for a total difference of 3.15 meters. Staff have completed a full zoning bylaw review of the property and feel the proposal is, as presented is supportable. And the homeowner, Grant Berlimier, is in here today if the council has any questions of him.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Muller. I'll go to questions from members of council. If anybody from the public is online and wishes to address council, this is a good time to raise your hand, but go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks so much, Mayor, and through you to staff. So had they completed this before the stop work order was issued, or did they continue working after the stop work order was issued?
I believe they were very close in time. The stop work order was received, or issued, and the patio had kind of completed its last final touches around the same time.
Do you wish to get further details from the applicant, or?
No, I'll believe staff that it's very close in timing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My next question, if I may, Mayor,
please
through you. Just to clarify the doubling of the fees, so the DVP fee is $1,750. Does that get doubled? And what is the cost of the building permit, and how much would that be if it gets doubled?
Right, Mr. Muller?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. No, the DVP fee does not get doubled. It's just the building permit fees, and it's the value of construction, or 1.5% of the value of construction that gets doubled. That fee gets doubled, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, when work gets done in Oak Bay by contractors, etc., usually when I've had work done at my house, they tell me that I need a permit. So was the work done by the resident themselves, or did they have another company do the work? And if so, what does the district what is the district able to do to organizations or developers, contractors who don't take out a permit for work?
Mr. Muller?
Through you, Mayor. I believe it was the homeowner himself who did the work. He can correct me if that's not right. And as far as what the district can do, I believe we have a fairly astute building permit staff that's pretty on top of illegal work, and this was caught, fairly quickly, even though it was, completed almost. It's a smaller patio, so I feel like the bylaw reporting is important in this case. But I mean, that's a bigger question. I think that I may not be able to answer myself.
And sorry, last question through you. I seem to remember this address from prior years. Is there something else that has happened on this property as well?
Through you, Mayor, there are other bylaw files for this property. I can't recall exactly what they are. They're not the purview of planning at this moment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff. I just wondered, so if this had been an on-grade patio, would we be here today talking about this? Is this all related really to the sunken patio and the depth, as opposed to when would it be declared landscaping?
Mr. Muller?
Because of its depth, it is considered an accessory structure, and I believe the size is what requires it to have a building permit, and the value as well. So I think that we would be here based off of the size and value for if the patio was at grade but larger, it would still need a building permit. But sorry.
If it was considered landscape, if it was considered landscaping, i.e., less than 30 centimeters in height, I believe it wouldn't require a building permit.
Yes. So the size would account to whether or not it would need a building permit, and because it is sunken, it needs an accessory structure, and it needs to meet the side yard setback requirements, and so that's why we're here today. So,
thank you, Councillor Smart.
Well, thank you. Through you, Mayor, just to clarify then, what is the disparity between the 30 centimeter allowance and the amount of sunken patio?
That's 30 centimeters above ground, wasn't it? That's the, so is there a specific, you're going to have to use the microphone, Mr. Green.
If it was built at grade and less than 30 centimetres in height, we would classify it as landscaping. It wouldn't be considered a structure in the district zoning bylaw because it's sunken and more than, whatever depth this is, it is considered a accessory structure, as Mr. Miller explained.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of, Councillor Braithwaite, continue.
But also, just going along on that, if you don't mind, Mayor, through you to staff, but the variance, the variance is 3.1 meters, so it would still have had to come for that variance, correct?
No, through Mayor, not if it was landscaping. Just because it is a structure, it has to meet the zoning bylaw requirements, the setbacks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for members of council? Before we get to comments, I'm going to go to the members of the public. Is there any members of the public that wish to address council on this matter? Please come forward. You missed some of the early preamble of this meeting, so I'll give you the rigmarole. Let's have a seat, and you can push the button to speak. We just ask that you give your name and just the municipality of residence. You don't have to give your address. And you're welcome to address council. You can have questions or comments on the application. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me now? So my name is Michael Maudsley, Mawdsley. We're my wife Margot Ross and myself are Oak Bay residents that live in the immediate vicinity of the house in question, and aside from any legal questions that are being discussed here, my wife and I and several of our neighbors on the street just wanted to state that we think that we support the variance because we feel that this project transformed a drainage problem that had to be solved into a very pleasing addition to the house and to the neighborhood. We often go for walks past there, and I often stop and pause just because it's such a lovely solution to the problem. I don't think anybody actually ever sits on the patio, but there's chairs there that look so inviting. I feel like going and sitting there myself. And so I would be disappointed if this variance was turned down.
Thank you, Mr. Maudsley. Maudsley. I don't know if I got that right. You did spell it for us, so it'll get it right. Any other members of the public who wish to address council on this? I'm just looking at our online piece here. Is there anybody there who wishes to raise? Don't see any hands popping up. So I'm not seeing any indications of any other members of the public wishing to speak. We're back to this table. So for consideration, I'd look for a motion to receive to start with. Moved in second. Is it to receive the report? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And then direction from council, please.
Your Worship, I would move that council approve development variance permit DVP 000149 to reduce the exterior side yard setback for the property located at 2108 Central Avenue.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Comments are welcome, or questions and continue. Go ahead, Councillor. I'll go to the mover first if you wish, and then I'll go to Councillor Watson and then Braithwaite.
And thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I'll be very happy to support this this motion. I think that it's a beautiful little solution and creates a beautiful little social space. And it's unfortunate that, in a way, that permits were required for this because it's very minor work, but it really has made a beautiful change to that corner of the neighborhood. And I feel sort of badly that the owner will now go through this penalty phase. But I do understand the need for the penalties because we do have rules, and we do need homeowners and their contractors to follow them. So, however, I think the final outcome, if we do approve this, and I hope we do, is that this lovely addition and change to our neighborhood will stay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate Councillor Watson's comments and the member of the public that came forward. However, for me, I understand that it's a good addition. However, I don't believe that the rules were followed. And we sit at this table to ensure that we protect residents and make sure that certain bylaws are followed. And so if everybody broke the rules, then we would have chaos within our community. So for me, it's much better to come and ask for permission than forgiveness. And I also feel that it's a pretty big variance that they're asking for, which is the 3.15 meters. And I did go and look at the site, and so I understand exactly why it was done and how it was done. However, for me, I feel that I have to speak for those other residents who do come forward and get a building permit and who do follow those rules. So I will be voting against the variance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Braithwaite. Are there any other discussion? Don't see any. I'll just make my final comments here. I will support the variance permit. I do think it's an interesting that series of lots along Central is a very interesting series of buildings that all seem to be jammed up against property lines. They weren't centered on the lots for some reason. They're all kind of higgledy-piggledy. And it sounds like there was a rationale for doing this. I second the sentiment that we would much rather prefer people come and ask permission to get the permits. That being said, mistakes do happen, especially by homeowners doing the work. And I don't think it's not sufficiently bad in this case that I would ask that it be, the work to be rescinded. So, so I think at the end of the day, the variance is the permanent resolution, and my threshold of this is whether or not it meets the threshold that it should stay, and I do believe it should. So I'll be supporting the resolution. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you. I'll just make my comments brief. I will support the variance going forward. It's not just about following the rules, it's about public health and safety at the end of the day. There are liability issues when certain structures are built and not not permitted. So I think, we have that responsibility to ensure that our community and the people who live in it are protected at the end of the day. So thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands. I will call the question. All those in favor and those opposed. Councillor Braithwaite opposed. That carries. The variance is approved. Thank you very much and have a great evening. We move on to new business. Our audience has dwindled down here to the end. We are now down to the for new business. Don't think nobody's informed me of any new business, so looking around the table, no. I'll just move on then to item 12.1, which is the last item of business on the agenda for school liaison officers. And I'll give this, now, from my memory, I believe this was moved and seconded at a previous meeting. Is that correct? No. It was, okay, so it was not moved yet at this point. It was just, okay. Thank you. I was going off my memory. So, Councillor Braithwaite, over to you. I know we spoke earlier today. I thought you might have a slight amendment to the language.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mayor. If I may, and I did speak to staff about this as well, I would like to make a slight amendment to a friendly amendment, or I guess I don't have to do that now, a slight change to the resolution, and that would be that the mayor write a letter to the chair of the Board of Education for School District 61, asking them to work with the Oak Bay Police Board to implement a redefined police liaison officer position.
Can I just read that one more time?
Yep. That the mayor, so it's basically the same as the first one that's on the agenda, but after District 61, it says, it would read, asking them to work with the Oak Bay Police Board to implement a redefined police liaison officer position.
Moved and seconded. I'm going to ask you just to also remove the chair of just write a letter to the Board of Education. That way it's to the whole board, not to the chair.
So that the mayor write a letter to the Board of Education for School District 61. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, that's good. So moved and seconded, is that adequate? Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. I think we talked a little bit about this before. I just feel that there are other municipalities and police boards that are writing letters to the school board to ask for this. It's an opportunity for Oak Bay, the police department, to have a significant influence on rebuilding a program if they're reinstated, and that to that end, reframing the program with an emphasis on counseling and leadership skills. I think that this would really help. I think we've seen a lot of input from teachers and other people within the community as well, that they feel that it would be really a good decision to reinstate the police liaison officer position. And you know, I think it would be good for us to have a look at maybe as I said, redefining what that might look like, and that might help for some people who were feeling some angst around it before. And I'll pass it on to Councillor Green.
Seconder, Councillor Green, do you have anything to add?
I do, thank you. I'm probably the only councillor at the table that has worked in youth and family court for many years and worked with families in conflict and youth in conflict. I know that the role of police is key now, and there is an emphasis now on restorative justice, which is an important piece of youth justice in our province. So the whole emphasis is on early intervention, on diversion, on rehabilitation. It is a well-known fact that when you reach youth early, and the earlier you reach them, the better, they will not make the transition to the adult system. And I have worked in both systems, both adult and youth and family. And I saw many of the youth that I worked with years previously come through the adult system as well. I also think this would encourage mutual understanding. It would break down some of the stereotypes we have both about police and about youth. I think it's a really important program. And I think I think I expressed this to you personally at the time that it was suspended or abolished. I also know that the data, while it was used to, justify the program by the Human Rights Commissioner, that data came from the southern U.S., and that is not the model for youth and police relationship building that we would want. And so I think it was information that was not local and was not endemic to British Columbia. So I'm very supportive of this idea of restoration. And, I think some people feel the program needs to be perhaps reframed, and I would certainly support that as well. But I will tell you from firsthand experience over many years, these programs involving police and youth work really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'll just say thank you to Councillor Braithwaite for changing the language. I think it's important. It's much more aligned with what the police board has asked, which is not to just reinstate, but to work with them to look at redefining that role, which I think that is due, absolutely. I have Councillor Patterson, then Smart, and then Appleton, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I struggled with this a bit because I'm also our liaison to Victoria Family Court Youth Justice Committee, and so I hear both sides of it. And I guess in thinking of this, I'm reminded that School Division 61 is not just in Oak Bay. It has a wider boundary. It spans 4 communities and 3 police forces. And for that reason, training and staffing constraints have resulted in some inconsistencies and perhaps inequitable programs for some of the schools. What is rolled out in Oak Bay may not be the same as what is rolled out in telecom schools, for instance. And so I struggled with it, and I've read the 2021 report, and as Councillor Green stated, it was based on data that was not compiled from this region. And the sad thing is that we don't have data compiled within Canada, and I think that speaks to the lack of consistency throughout the provinces and certainly within the region of providing services. But so I would see this as what we are proposing to do I would see it as then committing Oak Bay's police to work jointly with the Victoria Police Department and the Salish Police Department to ensure that training and resourcing is consistent, and that all schools, and more importantly, all kids in School District 61 are provided with fair and equitable service throughout the district. And so for that reason, I will support it, but I would certainly look forward in the future to having better data compiled for this region to ensure that we are giving better service to the kids throughout the CRD. So for that reason, I will support it, but I'm looking for better things in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Patterson. I have Councillor Smart and Appleton.
Yeah, thank you. I do also appreciate the rewording of the motion, because I really do feel like it, although I would love to see it up on the screen, to be honest. I do feel like it's getting really back to the intention of what I heard about not being able to just modify the program, but really needing to recreate something new from the ground up. And so with that kind of intention, it is something I can support. I did have an incident that happened to our family close after this program was resolved, and it was interesting to discover the limitations of what the school district can do if something happens outside of school property. And so there is a communication chain that has been interrupted that was there before, that is now lacking, and I think could really support our community if we can build up a new communication chain that is so that does allow for cooperation. And so I'm grateful to have this reworded motion at the table.
Councillor Smart. I have Councillor Appleton and Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And similarly, my thoughts are very similar to Councillor Smart's. I just want to extend my appreciation to Councillor Braithwaite. I know that she, feels strongly about this and has obviously put a lot of time and effort into thinking about how best to put this forward. So, and similarly for me, the rewording of the language, in my opinion, makes it much more supportable. It really makes a big difference. I just really want to recognize those that have called for a systemic restructuring of the liaison system. And this is a challenging conversation to have, because I'm well aware that every officer and every police force that supports the liaison officer program does it with good intent and with passion and with care for the community that they're serving. So it's a difficult conversation to have, but certainly for my part, Councillor Braithwaite bringing this motion forward and having a structured discussion about it, just for me personally, has resulted in a lot of reflection, a lot of sort of review, and a lot of thought process on my part as to where I thought the best solution would be. So I'm just very appreciative for the reworded language. It arrives exactly, I think, at the right time. I would hate to have to come in and sort of engage in a debate about sort of the fine points of the language. This really makes a big, huge difference for me, and certainly, been reflecting on having reservations and having and sharing some of the concerns about the previous system, but also being conscious, exactly as Councillor Smart has alluded to, about in the absence of that system, however, with its challenges and with its perceived deficiencies, if you want to put it that way, in the absence of that, there is a vacuum of support that needs to be addressed. So with the revised wording and with the thought that's gone into that, Your Worship, I would support the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do actually have a question about the process and the letter itself, if this motion is approved by council. There's been discussion around the table about the sort of broader context that led to this previous decision to remove the liaison officer role from all the schools in the district. And I just wanted to ask to what extent some of our discussion and concerns, certainly the pointing to the non-existence of data, the use of data from a completely different cultural context to drive a decision, and if that would be, if this letter will be broad enough to bring that to light and into the Board of Education. I guess I asked that because it's so easy to write a letter which just gets the big no stamp on it, because we're one of many people who's asking the same thing. So we've clearly thought about this with Councillor Braithwaite, and I can hear the experience at the table here with some real heart and concern for our community. And I guess I'm just asking, to what extent can we really make that case in the letter?
Sure, it's, I guess as the person being directed to write the letter, it probably won't be in great depth. I think getting to wear the hat of the chair of this body as well as the Oak Bay Police Board. There's been a lot of thought and a lot of research and a lot of work done at the police board level, and one of the reasons I'm appreciative of this is that, you know, the police board is making that. The police board at this point is essentially asking the school district to work with them to come up with a memorandum of understanding, similar to what the Vancouver did when they reinstated. That really helps define, you know, what the school district needs from the services, and how that body could fit and how it could be defined within that. So without going into the, you know, that data is available. I don't think it's necessarily that valuable. I think the hard work is like, that's the, you know, if the school district can define what benefits they would see, and they can use the expertise, you know, I think that the professional staff at the school district and the professional staff at the police services can work quite closely together to come up with an appropriate model, and then bring that back to the governance level to craft and support the memorandum of understanding. That's the approach being asked for at this point. So this letter probably won't delve into the, you know, this study had flaws, or this is the strengths of it. I think we're kind of past that at this point. Those arguments have already been made, and I think we're just going to, like, how can that move forward in a productive way is probably the approach taken on this one. I do want to go to Chief Fisher. Our police chief is online, I see, joining us. Chief Fisher, did you wish to add anything? You're going to have to unmute yourself. Oh, we're not hearing your audio for some reason. You're not muted, but you are not audible. Nope, we still can't hear you. Do you want to disconnect and then reconnect and see if that addresses the issue? Or you can call into the 1-855 number and hit *9 if that's faster and easier. I don't want to prevent you from talking, but I also don't want the meeting to go on forever. Would you like to speak? Sure. Chief Fisher, have you resolved? Not yet? Nope. So we do have a member of the audience here. We don't actually normally have public input on intergovernmental communications, but if you wish to just come forward, we're a relatively relaxed group here, and always would rather have input than not have it for the most part. So why don't you come forward? If you just, our process here, just going to state your name, municipality of residence, and just need to push the button first. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Lisa Gunderson. My son goes to Mount Doug High School. He's graduating this year. My older one graduated 4 years ago. And I am a member of the communities advocating for students and safety. I was actually your liaison for the VC PAC to the SD 61 school board. So I sat on this committee for 2.5 years. I'm not here today as representative of VC PAC, but as an individual who is advocating and working with police. And excuse me, just very quickly, just a couple of things. I wanted to reiterate that there is data. One of the things that the committee did is we actually interviewed parents and students. We have close to 4,000 respondents, and all that data is public data. And you can see there, we actually did it by racialized space as well as minoritized space, because that was very important to us to do so. So if you look at that data, one of the things that you will see is how many people are very negative and positive and positive. And one of the things I just would like to reiterate is a narrative that tends to be out there is that it's IBOC or Indigenous Black people of color are the ones that are pushing this, and that is not correct. That is a narrative that has been pushed. It's quite upsetting to me in many different ways. But when you look at the data, actually the students that had the most the place where we need to really increase relationship, definitely within our communities, but with students with sexual and gender identities. And I think that's very important because we lose track of those students when we focus in a different way. And the data is very clear on that. So we do have our own data. I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to put out there that we did do a list of recommendations if the program were to cease. Those recommendations have not been thoroughly followed. So that is one piece. We also have, with recommendations, there was nobody on that committee, police included, that didn't think engaging with a police liaison program with modification wasn't a way to go. And so you already have a tremendous list of recommendations that we worked very hard on with a lot of public input from teachers, parents, various community members, etc. That is there. So you're not starting from scratch. And that is something that all the police spaces are very familiar with. And so those recommendations are listed in the report. And that's one of the things that our group is going to be doing, is having a steering committee that's taking those recommendations, working with police, and figuring out which pieces need to go. Myself and some others met with the groups of the various chiefs of police just this past week, and we have recommendations that I know that many of the police are very interested in working with us, because the key piece is relationship. And that's the thing that has been lost more than anything, is the relationship between students, police, our families, etc. So the more that we can emphasize the importance of our relationship with one another, the better that I think everybody is going to be. I just wanted to make sure we understood that a lot of work, we spent a lot of time and there's hundreds and hundreds of pages and a lot of data. And so the more that we can reference people back to all of that information and all of us working together in concert, it's going to be very, very, very helpful. So thank you very much. Thank you for the letter that you're going to be doing. It's much, much appreciated.
Dr. Gunderson,
Yes.
did you referenced that data.
Mhm.
I'm familiar with it from the police board
Yeah.
piece of it, but perhaps is that publicly available? Maybe where can people in the public go to find that?
Yeah, it is publicly available. There's a bunch, it's hundreds of pages long. We have kind of isolated specific questions. I would tell you to go first to the questionnaire. That's probably the best space to go. I could actually probably send an email that shows some specific questions. So there's a specific question on your relationship with SPLOs, how many of you had them, your relationship with non-SPLO officers. And again, the data is shown with everybody, and then it's broken down with students in particular. And I do need to emphasize that there's no question that we have had various relationships with police. I was actually the liaison for our community, the African Heritage Association of Vancouver Island, with the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Advisory Council, so the DAC. And one of the things that we're all well aware of is there is a small percentage of our communities, and I don't mean just mine, but minoritized communities, that do have relationships with police that need to be improved. And there are ways that we can do that, but we need things like counseling and access to other resources. Those are part of the recommendations. When you end up cutting off something like this, and then you don't provide those, that is incredibly problematic, right? So one of the other documents I'd reference you to is we asked that there be a list of all the things that the liaison officers did and how the school board was going to replace them, because that was one of the requirements that we asked for. We recently got that, I'd say a couple of months ago, through VC PAC, and that's, again, available information. And what you will see is that almost everything now is dependent on principals and vice principals, and a school district, I think, coordinator, something like that, which is one human being. And it also lists the gaps, and they actually indicate the gaps that have happened. And if you've talked to many of our principals and vice principals, who, by the way, will not be able to speak. They're under the board, but we know, talking to many parents, that this has become a huge extra burden on them. They're afraid that they're missing students, and it's quite problematic. So all of that information is available. We can make it a little bit easier for you by sending some of that directly to you. And that's just part of the, I think, frustrating part, is we do have this information. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
And yeah, if you do, maybe if you could send an email link through to obcouncil@oakbay.ca or to me or just the administration it'll get to us, and that would be helpful.
It'll be my pleasure to do so. And to let you know, we have met with MLAs on all sides as well, who are supportive of this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gunderson. We have Chief Fisher. Oh, we've got him on phone.
Yeah, I'll try my mic now as well.
Oh, you got your mic working, so very good.
Okay, I'll use the mic. Thank you. Just wanted to touch on a couple of items quickly. One being that, as Dr. Gunderson mentioned, the area chiefs are well aware of the desire amongst some for changes in the system or in the liaison program, and we're definitely open to that. We've been open to that from the outset, and I know our board has definitely communicated that in their discussions and our meeting with the school board. What's most difficult in this situation for all of us is we're starting to see the impacts now as our families. And one of the primary impacts, as Councillor Green alluded to, is the lack of early intervention. So that by the time some of these families and youth in crisis are showing up for assistance from the police, they're well into the realm of the criminal justice system in many cases. The level of bullying or sextortion in some cases or violence is something that could have been dealt with much earlier with police working with school staff and students and families. And we're just seeing that gap now, and we're seeing a gap in the communication as well. I believe it was Councillor Smart mentioned a comment about the communication isn't at the same, it's still there, but it's not at anywhere near the same level as having a police officer in the schools that the administration and the PAC is very familiar with and will reach out to at a much earlier stage. Now, essentially, they're in the call line just like any other citizen that calls in, and that leads to delays, it leads to frustration, and it leads to a much, I would say, lower quality and effectiveness in the service that we're providing, and I don't think any of us want to see that. So, as well, as Dr. Gunderson alluded to, we did meet with a parent group, the area chiefs, on last Thursday, and had a presentation from their group. And again, the research and a lot of the survey data, if one takes the time to read it, it really speaks to the support that was there for the program. And to see a lot of that support simply ignored and the baby thrown out with the bathwater is extremely frustrating for those of us that believe strongly in this program and the potential that it has. So I think it's important that Council knows we're definitely open to modifications to address many of the concerns that were raised. And I think to provide an opportunity to speak to the extra training that our school officers receive to take on that role. Because it's a very emotionally intensive role for them. They get heavily engaged in, invested, I think is probably the best word. Not only in the time that they're in those positions, but in the years that follow, given the relationships that they've built. And you worry about the impact that can have losing that connection with youth as this delay continues.
Thank you, Chief. I was going to say a few more words, but I think Dr. Gunderson, the Chief, probably said most of what I was going to say on this. I'm obviously supportive of the motion. I think this is I think, opportunities come with these kind of moments of change, and I think I believe strongly that, I hear the concerns that were raised by the school district board. I don't agree that their interpretation of the facts was aligned with mine in terms of the outcome, but I do think I think if this motion passes, and I can lend our voice to encourage them to come to the table and to work on reimagining what that could be. I think it could be a very positive outcome. But I do think it has some urgency as well, to Chief Fisher's point. I do think this is one of those items that better to be working on it now and getting something back in place as soon as possible, because there are kids, I believe, that do fall through the cracks or end up in the criminal justice system that could have been avoided. And I think we have an obligation to try and provide that safety. So with that, we've all spoken. I'm glad, thank you for coming out here this evening. I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. I will write a letter. Thank you very much. That actually concludes our meeting for the evening.
Move adjournment.
Motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. We are adjourned.
Thanks.